Today, I'm talking to Rishi Taparia. Rishi is the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Business Operations at Legion. He's also an angel investor and writes a weekly newsletter, Tippets by Taps, about commerce, technology, and the future of work. Most importantly, he's a fellow alumni of Northwestern. He graduated in the middle of the 2008 financial crisis and went to work for Merrill Lynch. He obviously has some stories to share. So, I wanted to get his thoughts on how students graduating into the current market can stay sane amidst the chaos. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Rishi Taparia. So hey Rishi, thanks for joining me on this call. And before we dive too deep into talking about how students should be looking to approach like recruitment and things like that, and I know you graduated in the 08 09 recession, so you have a unique perspective on this. Do you mind like just giving people a quick intro for everyone coming from my end?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me. So look, very quick background on myself. Born in Canada, but grew up in Indonesia. So was an expat there. Spent my entire childhood living in Jakarta, and then came to the U.S. for undergrad, Northwestern. Go Cats!
Go Cats!
And graduated in 2008, which was the last crisis that we had. My first job out of school was as an investment banker at Merrill Lynch. Worked in the financial institutions group, which was a fascinating time. We'll get into it a little bit later. But all of our clients were the insurance companies, the banks, the asset managers who were impacted the most. As a byproduct of a bunch of bad decisions, and then just the general macro climate. Did that for 2 years, and then realized that I wanted to do something different. And so ended up moving to California, in part to get into technology, and in part to chase my then girlfriend, who is originally from the Bay Area, also Northwestern, and then girlfriend, now wife. So check. Which is great. Got into venture, actually. We got super lucky, so was able to get a job at Scale Venture Partners. They were looking for someone with my profile, and so joined Scale. Mid-stage fund focused at that point, mostly Series B and Series C stage companies. And so got a chance to work with some great folks and get to just understand the tech environment, tech landscape. And then got pulled over to another fund, Matrix Partners, after 2 years at Scale, focused mostly on early stage companies. And so got the chance to go even earlier, seed and Series A stage businesses, across both consumer and enterprise. And then in 2014, we had invested in a company at Matrix called Point, a payments company that was trying to do for merchants what the smartphone did for consumers, deliver amazing software and services on top of a necessary device that you use on a daily basis, in this case, the payment terminal. And so we invested in Point, incubated the idea out of the Matrix office. And then a few months in, our CEO at Point, Osama Badir, amazing guy and a mentor of mine, came to me and said, "Hey, why don't you come get a real job and join me building this company out?" And so I left Matrix in 2014 and joined Point as a seventh employee, first non-technical hire, largely responsible for scaling the commercial side of the house. And so in that role, wore every non-product engineering hat under the sun, sales, marketing, BD, legal, finance, accounting, janitorial services, real estate, you name it, I did it. And just had a great ride through 5 years there, growing the business, and seeing that grow. And we can certainly talk about that as well. And then last year, transitioned into an advisor at Point. Took some time off to spend time with a newborn son. And then in December of last year, joined Legion as the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Business Operations. What we're doing at Legion is trying to turn hourly jobs into good jobs, and doing that by building technology that helps bring employers and hourly employees onto a common platform to manage their hourly work. And so doing everything from demand forecasting and labor optimization, and then schedule preferences, automated scheduling with time and attendance, all on a common platform, using AI and ML to create the optimal schedule that takes into account employee preferences as well as the needs of employers. And so I've been here for 6 months, and having a ton of fun. And then separately, started a little angel fund where I do some angel investing out of as well with a very close friend of mine. And so certainly keeping busy, but
Yes.
very grateful to have had an amazing opportunity and great mentors thus far.
Uh, That's awesome, man. I mean, that's quite the ride. The only thing I'll say is your son needs to come to Northwestern, right? Like if his two parents
Well,
are,
it's
that's
funny.
not a,
I was Northwestern '08. My wife Northwestern 2010. My sister Northwestern 2011. So purple bleeds deep
yep.
in the Taparia household.
Yeah. So, we've already got a spot,
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly
it's,
right.
it's,
Let's
it's,
hope
it,
so.
but that's awesome, man. I mean, before we get into the serious side of things, would love to know some of your, cause I know that, I'm graduating in whatever, 15 days. So that's scary. I'd just be curious to hear like, favorite moments from your time here before we go into the serious side of things.
Oh man, I mean, so
Apart
many.
from apart from meeting your wife, because we've talked
Yeah,
about that.
right.
But apart from that,
So that was a big win. No, but I mean,
let's put that at the top, and then let's
my
go down
freshman
the
year,
list.
yeah, exactly. My freshman year, we played Ohio State in football
Okay.
under the lights at Ryan Field.
Yeah.
And that game was insane. We went into overtime. We beat them in overtime. It was national. They were the number 7 team in the country, if memory serves. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like rushing the field. I mean, that's up there. Kanye West came to Northwestern.
Yes.
A&O brought Kanye before Kanye was Kanye. And he played at the basketball stadium, which is, again, amazing. Dance Marathon. I was on the exec board of Dance Marathon my junior year, and just had a blast there as well. And so just so much fun, so many memories. But those are a few that stand out for sure.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. All right. Let's get into the bread and butter of things. So, you graduated at the start of the 08-09 recession. Take us back to when you graduated and like the first through the first few weeks, when you joined Merrill Lynch, like, talk us through the scenes and like, I mean, more importantly, like just like what kind of emotions were going through your head as you saw, everything going on around you.
Yeah, it's a great question. Looking back, I just realized how little I knew at the time. I just graduated from college, just moved to New York, was in the financial district. I was super excited. The world was starting to crumble. But admittedly, I didn't know enough about what was going on. I was just excited to be kind of in the real world.
No.
And it was definitely tense, but I don't think anybody truly understood the magnitude, at least when I started, right? Because you're looking at, I was a 21-year-old with a bunch of friends all moving to New York, and we were just hanging out and excited to have a paycheck and excited to have jobs and just starting. And, you're coming off of the last few years where even doing internships and whatnot, like, finance had got, peaked. People were making a bunch of money. And this was freedom and the start of a new journey. And so I think when I first graduated, it was just excitement. But as we got kind of further in and you go through the training, you start working on projects, and you're reading the news now, and you're starting to realize, oh, something bad is happening, to the point where, we were sitting around, I remember very vividly, near in the financial district, the weekend before Lehman collapsed and the weekend before Merrill Lynch got sold to B of A. And we were scared. We didn't know what was going to happen because the idea of, friends potentially losing jobs or having to move and things like that finally dawned upon us. And so I think the fear was certainly there, but it was, I think, blunted a little bit by just a lack of understanding of what was going on and the magnitude. But I mean, there were definitely days where, stock market collapsed 700 points and the bar downstairs at the office would give discounts based on how much the market tanked, to the point where there was one day that it dropped 754 points, I think. And, drinks were $1. And then they were like, okay, we can't do this anymore because it happened too much. And so, there are definitely things like that were taking place. But I think, ignorance is bliss in some cases. And I certainly cannot pretend to say that I had enough of a broad scope of what was going on to probably make a fully informed decision and rational thought. But I think that was probably a good thing from a psychological perspective.
No, totally. I think that's really hard to do that today, to not have a, yeah, just because, you're bombarded with everything from like Twitter and like Facebook and
Yeah.
like, that's just much harder to do, to not have the
Absolutely. I mean,
complete
this is
picture.
pre-Twitter, I mean, Facebook was still, family photos and beaches and whatnot. There's no Instagram.
Yeah.
It was Facebook, and then you're on your BlackBerry Messenger, and seriously, it's like BBM and chat on GChat.
Yeah.
And that was the state of conversation. So you're reading the news from New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and I think it's not as real time. You're not seeing the scenes and all of that, and so I think it's very different today. But yeah, I mean, you were at that time you're able to throw blinders up, and I think that certainly from a psychological perspective offered some protection to a new grad, 21 years old in a big city, just trying to work as hard as possible and make sure that he's doing what he's supposed to.
No, that's awesome. Good for you guys, I guess. I also know you were an international student, and that adds just an additional layer of complexity over everything else. So, how did that factor in? I'm sure that increased the anxiety levels somewhat.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think the being an international student, as a Canadian citizen, right? I still had my F1 visa. I was still on OPT. I was lucky in that I had gotten selected as part of the lottery to get the H1 prior to my graduation.
Okay.
And so Merrill Lynch applied for me, got it, and so now we're good. And so I was going to get on my H1B the next year. I think the thing that was probably most devastating for me in that time was, if you recall, or just some history. So when the banks took TARP money from the U.S. government, this is in the fall of 2008. One of the stipulations was that you're no longer allowed to hire non-U.S. citizens or non-permanent residents, or people who were not legally allowed to work in the United States. And part of that meant you could also not apply for visas if you were employing someone at the bank. And so friends of mine who, again, like the same as me, graduating from great schools and on the like, and we all have the same job, the same role, who did not get selected as part of the lottery in 2008, but were going to apply in 2009 for the H1 lottery, all of a sudden were no longer allowed to. And so as a result, they had to leave not only the country, but also find new jobs because they could no longer be employed by the banks, whether it's Merrill Lynch, B of A, Chase, JP Morgan, and so JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and so on. And so that was really eye-opening and scary. I mean, like, it was pure luck, right? And it reinforced to me just how much luck plays a role in life. And so, that was a really interesting and crazy time. I'm still keep in touch with folks, but it very easily could have been me if I hadn't gotten lucky and gotten into part of the lottery, and which would have completely changed the trajectory and kind of course of my career and life from there. And so just reinforced the importance of getting lucky at times.
No, totally. So crazy times. Let's zoom out of then and get into 2020. Equally crazy times, maybe even a little bit more so.
I would say so.
So looking at today, what advice would you give to a senior, or a junior who has had their kind of full-time offer or their internship offer rescinded due to COVID, and they're just trying to, struggle to get back on their feet? I mean, I think tons of people are just scared and they want some sort of a blueprint or a structure to think through these next, 3 to 6 months. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a tough time. So I think the first thing that I would say is, these are not normal times. And so recognize that this is craziness, and it's okay to feel fear. It's okay to feel the discomfort. It's okay to be uncomfortable and afraid, because there is uncertainty. And I think as humans, we're genetically predisposed to try and avoid uncertainty as much as possible. That's how we've made it this far as a
Yeah.
species. And so that's okay. But I would also say, don't allow yourself to get into the warp of this is going to completely change the course of my life and everything is doomed,
Hmm.
because at the end of the day you're also in a very lucky position because you're just starting out. And
Hmm.
so this allows you to experiment, and it gives you an opportunity to find other things, to really say, hey, was that consulting job that I was going to get, is that really what I wanted to be spending time on? Is
Hmm.
that banking job what I really wanted to be spending time on? COVID is providing an opportunity to take a step back and look at where your interests are, what you're excited about, and where you find yourself drawn in terms of your attention,
Hmm.
and see if you can leverage that into something that you may have not even considered. I think this is the first time now where the path, so to speak, has ended, right? You
Yeah.
go to school, you go to high school, you get good grades, you get into college, you get good grades in college, you get the job offer, you graduate from college, and you get into your first job. Like, that's the path. And now that the path has been, shall we say, short circuited a little bit, um, let that be a forcing function to actually give yourself room to take a step back and think and
Hmm.
evaluate, is that the path that I wanted to go on? Because so much of it is, predetermined. And now this is, I think, an opportunity. And again, don't don't believe that the first job, the first two jobs, the first 6 months of your career is going to fundamentally, shape the rest of your life, because you're going to be working for the next 60 years. And so, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, isn't going to have, it's certainly, again, don't get me wrong, I know that it's crazy and crazy times, but it's not going to fundamentally change your life. I think focus on what you can control,
Hmm.
focus on what is available to you, and think about how you might turn it into an opportunity,
Hmm.
as opposed to letting it weigh you down and hold you back as an anchor.
No,
I've
totally.
been, I've been reading I've been reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius,
Yeah.
on recommendation of a few friends. And I think, if I'd read that 10 years ago, it wouldn't have resonated. But right now, one of the things he talks about, or he says, is, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed.
Hmm.
Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. And I think that's a great lesson for this time, because it really is about what you can control. And one of the things you can control is how you spend your time.
No, totally. I mean, two things stand out for me is just like taking agency. So not letting acknowledging the fear, but not letting it, paralyze you. Um,
Yep.
and then, the second thing is the short-term, long-term thing. And I think tons of people, I mean, I fall into this category 100%. I think on like the terms of like 2 years or 3 years. So I'd be
Yeah.
curious to hear like, what are your, um, like how did you make that switch in thinking, and I'm sure that like time helps, but and like experience helps, but just like in terms of like, was there a particular point where you started thinking more on like a longer term horizon, or is that like more of a gradual thing? I'd just be curious to hear like, are there any things that you do to like enforce that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thinking back to when I was graduating from college, it was very much kind of what's going to come next and what's the next step. I
Yeah.
thought, the path for me that had been laid out was, okay, great. You graduate from Northwestern, you go to Merrill Lynch, you work 2 years at Merrill Lynch, then you get a job in PE, and then maybe you go to business school or not, and that was the path. And I realized, kind of let's call it post financial crisis in 2009, 2010, like that wasn't what was doing it for me.
Hmm.
And, it wasn't the opportunity and the trajectory that I wanted to be on. And so I tried to figure out, how do I get back into something that I've historically had a love for, enjoyed being around. Technology was always one, even in middle school, high school. I was the Apple campus rep at Northwestern.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
so it's, for me, it was like, okay, technology, how do I make that happen? Okay, that feels like California. And oh, my girlfriend, also California. Okay, how do I make both of those things happen? And so that led me to try and think about a different trajectory, a different path.
Mm.
But it was born out of looking at, the path that I was on, and evaluating that. But even then, I admit to very much short term, like, okay, what's the next role? What's the next role?
Mm.
And so I think for me, what I try and do is just, again, remember now, what is in my control? Where do I want to be? And how do I want to be living 5, 7, 10 years from now,
Mm.
as a different frame on the question, as opposed to what do I want? What's the job that I want? What's the role that I want? Where do I want to be spending my time is more the question that I ask, because that allows me to then back into what are the roles, or the types of roles, or the opportunities that I want to follow up and pursue, which I think has been a helpful frame for me. And I think there's also, I'm very lucky to have a 21-month-old son, and so he also helps add perspective for me. But again, a totally different mindset that has afforded. But if you had told me 15 years ago, hey, by the time you're 34, 35, you're going to be living in California, working at a startup with a kid, and this is how your career would have progressed, I'd be like, you're crazy, there's no way. And I think just goes to show that luck happens, but it does take kind of being in the right place at the right time, and allowing yourself to be open to those experiences.
Totally. I love that, that last line you used, which is that luck does come, but you kind of have to be ready for it, and be in order to grab those opportunities. So let me play out a scenario that I know many of my friends are lucky, or in some ways unlucky to be in. So they've kept their offers, but have had their start dates pushed back to December, January, or I heard yesterday one of my friends is starting in April.
Sure.
I mean, that's a year from now. So they've already graduated, or will be graduating soon. How would they, how should they best use these months that they have?
I honestly think it's up to them. I won't presume to say what's best for each individual. Maybe sometimes you need a break, right? Sometimes you just need to not do anything, and you'll be called unproductive. You'll be called wasting time. As son to Indian parents, there's a general sense of you want to be making progress.
I can already imagine the conversation going on.
Correct. And so I think just being true to yourself and saying, okay, what do I need right now? And really, but that requires looking inward. I think the worst thing in terms of use of time would be to fall into a trap of, okay, well, I can do this tomorrow. I want to do this, but I'm going to do it later. And, get into the cycle of scrolling on Twitter, being on Instagram, watching, all of the shows. If that's not what you need, it's very easy to fall into those traps. Just make sure you're breaking yourself out. For me, when I've had time, I took some time off to be dad. It was very much about creating a schedule for myself that was spend time with my son, but also then, okay, here's a set of books I want to read, or things I want to learn, or whatever it is. And I think, with the confidence that there's an offer waiting for you, and a job waiting for you, I think that offers immense freedom to explore, and to think, and to write, and to read, and to learn. So, if there are things that what's the craziest thing that you can think about learning about? And whatever comes to your mind, like, hey, write it down. And maybe that's the thing that you go explore. But I think that from that time for me would mean freedom of thought, freedom of learning. And I would use that to at least explore something that maybe during normal times, I would say, oh, that I can't, that's too
Yeah.
much of a waste of time. It's not helping me in any way.
Hmm. That's curious. What do you think it would have been for you, like, when you graduated?
When I graduated, well, when I graduated, I probably would have traveled, but
Okay.
obviously that's not one thing. That's
Not
not something
possible.
that we can do right now.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I think one of the things that I wish I would have done more in undergrad in general is just take the crazy, like, class on, pick rent, like, ancient Greek philosophy
Art
or
art theory.
art, yeah, art history, or, I was very much in the mode of got to take, these are the requirements, got to get to the requirements, got to get done, got to get, and just like
Hmm.
always looking to finish,
Yeah.
as opposed to just savor and learn and take it all in. Um, and so now, whenever I talk to high schoolers, graduates, like, take the crazy class, take the thing that you do not see how is going to impact your career, your job, your life going forward,
Hmm.
because that's probably what's going to spark an interest,
Hmm.
or that's most likely to spark an interest that you didn't know was there.
Yeah.
But I would like that's I wish I did more of that in undergrad, and so it probably would have been a little bit of that. But again, my headspace when I was graduating at that time was very much of, okay, on to the next.
Hmm.
And so I don't know if I would have done what I'm suggesting
Yeah.
that you do.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Totally. I think, I read this book recently, and what you said about, it's going to spark something new. Um, I read this book recently called Origin of Wealth, and it talks about a little about algorithms. And there's this idea that, you have like almost like a mountain range. And then, typically all you want to do is you want to be on the safe path, and you want to, keep going, like,
yeah,
mountain to mountain, and like, just like keep walking. But every now and then you want to jump. You want to jump to get on a higher mountain. Um, and I think of these, and like, it never really like side projects or like, taking an interesting class as like these sort of random jumps, or like, most likely, like, you're probably going to be like equally, good, or like, you might go even a little bit down in terms of like elevation. But every now and then you'll jump, and you'll get to a mountain that's overall much higher. um
yep.
and so, it just, when you said, you're going to explore something new, that's immediately like, came to my mind.
Well,
But
and I think but that metaphor, I think, also applies to career, and certainly the way I think about career, right? I think of step functions that you can reach, and in every, generally speaking, people are looking for this,
yeah.
but I think that doesn't lead to as high a peak.
Hmm.
And so, you have to take the risk and, take the crazy job at a startup as seventh employee, because
Yeah.
that'll open up new opportunities. And take the crazy job as, a new, new person at a early stage company.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way I think about careers. Like, what do I want to build? What skills do I want to
Oh.
develop in that kind of this phase that will then get me to the next step function,
Hmm.
and ultimately lead to a higher peak, and hopefully more
Yeah.
harmony, and satisfaction.
No, that's awesome. Before we leave, and before I ask you for some general advice, talk to us about your newsletter, because I've been a devoted reader for the past.
I appreciate it.
Just talk to us about, like, how that idea came about, and what kind of things you talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in 2017, I think newsletters were starting to get, a little bit more popular.
Yeah.
Benedict Evans had a great one, which just had a bunch of different articles that he thought was interesting. Shane Parrish at Farnham Street
Yeah.
was also sending out a weekly kind of newsletter with different interesting articles. And I thought that was a great way to disseminate information that was interesting to the author, to readers, and potentially get more feedback on that as well. And so for me, it started out as, hey, how do I make sure I'm taking in information and absorbing it? Well, the best way to do that is to write about it, or to teach it,
Hmm.
right? And so, what are things that are interesting to me? Technology, business, commerce, the future of work, and then, some fun things now, parenting and the like.
Yeah.
And so I just started a newsletter. Started sending it out to family, to some friends, and it's grown over the last few years. And so now I think I'm on, 140 weeks or so of writing. I
Wow.
try and do it it's good discipline for me.
Yeah.
It's a forcing function. I think I missed something like 4 weeks in 2.5+ years.
Okay.
It comes out every Sunday, and it's fun. And so it serves for me as a vehicle to experiment, to explore ideas,
Yeah.
to write, and so hopefully try to get more feedback on it from people. And thank you for yours as well, and your readership. Yeah, so rishitaparia.com/newsletter, and it'll hit you to the site.
That's awesome. That's super cool. I mean, I think you were pretty early to the game there.
Well, I got to be early to some things at some point.
No, I always, whenever people talk about, I see 35-year-olds with, thousands and thousands of subscribers. I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, don't worry, I've got a 15-year head start on you. And that's kind of how I think about it. That's how I make myself feel better about the fact that their writing is like 10 times better than mine.
Well, I think that the interesting thing is, for me with writing especially, it's a hard thing because you never feel like you're there. And I think that's one of the beauties of writing, is that you'll always find people who you think are better, more articulate, more interesting.
No.
And I think that's one of those amazing things that this is one of those things I want to work on all the time. And again, wish I had started when I was graduating from college.
Yeah.
And certainly, we'll push you to do that. And anybody else, like, you're just write
Yeah.
things down.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, last question. Just general advice to graduating seniors. We've still got about 15 days left, at least at the quarter schools. So how should we spend the last moments? How should we approach the first, let's say, 6 months? After we graduate. Hopefully we'll all be going into great jobs. Starting soon. So just general advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think recognize that this is abnormal, and it's certainly not the graduation that you expected. But understand that just because the graduation isn't one that you expected doesn't mean you can't enjoy and savor the moment. You've worked so hard to
Mm.
get to this point. You've built such great relationships. Make sure you're doing what you would otherwise. Engage with your friends and reminisce on the fun times, all the crazy memories, the Dillo days, the late nights studying that turned into the crazy conversations sitting in the hallway
Yeah.
until 4 a.m. The extra drink that you probably shouldn't have had. All of it, because that was part of the experience.
Yeah.
And make sure you take the time to reflect on the experience, because it's something you worked very hard for.
Hmm.
And no pandemic is going to take that away. And then I think for me, it's just about make sure you open yourself up to relying on others as well.
Hmm.
I think the tendency with shelter in place and just being where we are, it's like you almost, it's too easy to close yourself off. It's too easy to get into a rhythm of Twitter, Facebook, and feeling like you're connected, but not really. And so, definitely make time and make space for conversations, for phone calls, for walks, and check in with yourself, because I think that's going to be increasingly important as you now enter, the real world, so to speak, and enjoy it, and remember that it's not permanent. It's not going to persist.
Hmm.
We as humans have an amazing tendency to adapt to circumstances. And so use the time to have fun, use the time to read, to explore, to talk to friends, to do whatever it is, and see how you can make the most of it, because normal will return, or whatever the new normal is.
Yeah.
And you're going to slide right into that as if nothing happened, I promise. And
Yeah.
so just make sure you're taking the time to check in with yourself, with your friends, and be there for each other.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, Rishi, and thanks for having this call. I'm 100% sure that everyone's going to find this, really really useful. And thanks for sharing your perspective.
No, my pleasure, Sid. Thanks so much for having me. I congratulations to you
Thank you.
as you're about to graduate as well. And happy to be a resource for anybody if you're looking for that. I'm online, Twitter at taps, rishitaparia.com. Shoot me an email, and happy to be there. Happy to offer support wherever I can.
Thank you so much.